Chapter 1. The Mysterious Doll. A group of teenagers consisting of 4 friends, Michael, Emma, Jason, and Lisa, spent their free time exploring various interesting places in the city. On a beautiful summer day, they heard about an old antique shop located in the city center. Rumor had it that this shop had dozens of antique dolls, each with its own unique story. The teenagers were intrigued and decided to go in search of this shop. They strolled through narrow streets, breathing in the atmosphere of the old city. The weather was sunny, but the wind brought a coolness, rustling the leaves of the trees. The heroes discussed their expectations of this shop. "I heard that these dolls possess some sinister power," Michael said, looking at his friends with interest. "Really?" Emma asked in surprise. "I thought they were just old toys." "I don't know, but I feel like there's something more to this shop," Jason added, looking at the antique buildings that surrounded them. Finally, they found the shop. The entrance was adorned with old wooden doors and a sign that read antiques. They entered inside and immediately felt the smell of antiquity and dust. The shop was filled with various antique items, old furniture, books, porcelain dishes, and of course, dolls. "Look at these dolls," Lisa exclaimed, pointing to the shelves on which dozens of antique dolls stood. "They look so lifelike." "Yes, they really give off a strange feeling," Michael agreed, approaching one of the dolls. The doll was tall, with voluminous hair and a voluminous dress. Its eyes seemed so realistic that it seemed as if it was looking directly at them. Michael carefully picked up the doll and examined it more closely. "This doll is from the past century," he said, feeling his fingers sink into the voluminous dress. "I think it's unusual." "Don't take it," Emma warned. "We don't know what could happen with it." But Michael didn't listen to her advice and decided to take the doll with him. They paid for it and left the shop. On the way home, they discussed their impressions of the shop and the doll. "I feel like this doll is different from all the others," Michael said, looking at it with curiosity. "Do you really think it could be cursed or something like that?" Lisa asked, laughing. "I don't know, but there's something about it that attracts me," Michael replied, gripping the doll in his hand. On the way home, they didn't notice that the sky was becoming covered with dark clouds and the wind was getting stronger. But they had no idea that their lives would soon change when they brought this doll into their apartment. Chapter 2. The Sinister Power. Upon arriving home, the heroes placed the doll on a shelf in the living room. The apartment was cozy and bright, with large windows through which soft sunlight streamed in. The air was filled with the scent of flowers on the windowsill. "What do you think of our new find?" Lisa asked, looking at the doll with some concern. "I feel like it's looking at us," Michael said, sitting on the couch and observing the doll. "Its eyes are so alive." "Do you really think it could be cursed?" Emma asked, laughing. "It's just a doll." But Michael couldn't shake the strange feeling that the doll was watching them. He decided to conduct a small experiment and placed the doll in another room, closing the door. The heroes gathered in the living room and began discussing their impressions. "I feel like it's drawing attention to itself," Jason said, sitting on the edge of the table. "I can't take my eyes off it." "Could it really possess some kind of power?" Lisa pondered, looking at the doll. Suddenly, they heard a strange rustling from the other room. They turned around and saw that the door, behind which they had placed the doll, was slightly ajar. They exchanged frightened glances and decided to check what was happening. When they entered the room, they saw that the doll was standing in the same place where they had left it. But something was off. The doll seemed slightly distorted, as if its pose had changed. "This is impossible," Emma exclaimed, looking at the doll in horror. "It moved." "It can't be," Michael whispered, approaching the doll and carefully lifting it. "We closed the door." They returned to the living room, but the feeling of unease didn't leave them. The doll stood on the shelf, but its eyes seemed even more alive and ominous. Suddenly, they heard the sound of breaking glass. They turned around and saw that the glass table on which the doll had been placed shattered into pieces. "What's happening?" Lisa screamed, looking at the broken table. "It's all because of this doll," Michael said angrily, gripping it in his hand. "We have to get rid of it." But when he tried to throw the doll in the trash, it suddenly came to life and struck his hand. Michael felt a sharp pain and let go of the doll. They all realized that this doll possessed a sinister power and was haunting them. Now the heroes understood that they needed to unravel the mystery of the doll's origins and find a way to get rid of them before they caused even more harm. But they knew that they were in for a long and dangerous journey, full of nightmares and trials. Chapter 3: Quest for the Truth. The heroes decided that they needed to find information about the origin of the dolls and how to get rid of them. They gathered together in the living room to discuss their next actions. The apartment was filled with heavy atmospheric tension, and outside the window, a strong rainstorm raged. "We need to find out where these dolls came from and why they are haunting us," Michael said, looking at his friends. "We need information." "Right," Lisa agreed, sitting on the couch. "Maybe there are some books or articles about cursed objects in the library." "I agree. But how will we know which books we need?" Jason asked, looking at the rain outside. "Perhaps we should consult an occult expert," Emma suggested, sitting on the edge of the table. The heroes agreed that it could be a good idea. They started searching for information about specialists in this field and found the contact of one expert who lived nearby. They decided to visit him the next day. The next morning, when the heroes left the apartment, they noticed that the rain had stopped, but the sky was still covered with gray clouds. They headed towards the expert's house, which turned out to be an old mansion with crooked walls and an abandoned garden. "It seems like this house hasn't been visited in a long time," Lisa remarked, looking around. "Perhaps this expert doesn't receive clients very often," Michael speculated, knocking on the door. The door slowly opened, revealing an old man in a black cloak. He had gray hair and deep wrinkles on his face. He invited the heroes into his room, which was filled with books, candles, and strange artifacts. "How can I help you?" the expert asked, looking at them with curiosity. "We are looking for information about cursed objects, particularly dolls," Michael replied, sitting on an old sofa. "Ah, dolls," the expert muttered, pensively gazing into the distance. "They can be very dangerous if they fall into the wrong hands." The heroes began telling the expert about their strange findings and how the dolls were haunting them. The expert listened attentively, nodding from time to time. "You need to find the source from which these dolls originated," the expert said, standing up and approaching a bookshelf. "I know of one book that can help you with that." He took out an old book with a dusty cover and handed it to Michael. The heroes gratefully accepted the book and thanked the expert for his assistance. "Be careful," the expert warned, seeing them off at the door. "These dolls possess a power that is better not to ignore." The heroes left the mansion and headed back to their apartment, holding the book in their hands. They knew that they had to study this book and find answers to their questions. But they also understood that greater trials and dangers awaited them before they could rid themselves of the cursed dolls. Chapter 4: Captives of Darkness. The heroes returned to their apartment and began studying the book given to them by the expert. The apartment was filled with tension, and outside the window, the heavy rain continued. They sat in the living room, surrounded by old books and candles, trying to find answers to their questions. "Here's what I found," Michael said, reading the book aloud. "Dolls that possess an ominous power can be created through rituals and curses. Their essence seeps into the doll, giving it life and the ability to haunt its owners." "But how do we break this curse?" Emma asked, looking at Michael hopefully. "The book says that the only way to break the curse is to find the source of its power and destroy it," Michael replied, closing the book. The heroes exchanged glances and realized that they needed to find the source of power that kept these dolls alive. They decided to go back to the antique shop where they first found the doll. When they arrived at the shop, they found it closed. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. The heroes decided to enter through the back door and began searching for something that could be the source of power for the dolls. They searched every corner of the shop, turning over old items and looking for any evidence. Suddenly, they heard a strange rustling from the back room. They hurried there and discovered an old wooden box covered in dust and cobwebs. "There it is," Jason exclaimed, picking up the box. "This must be the source of power for the dolls." They decided to destroy the box to break the curse. But when Michael tried to open it, He felt a sharp pain in his hand and fell to the floor. He saw that his hand was engulfed in dark energy that spread throughout his body. Emma cried, falling beside him. "What's happening to you?" "I can't resist," Michael muttered, feeling the dark energy engulfing his consciousness. The other heroes realized that they couldn't defeat the curse and save Michael. They were doomed to become victims of these ominous dolls. The dark energy began to seep into their bodies, and they felt their strength leaving them. "I'm sorry," Lisa whispered, falling to the floor next to him.